We've been in the season for just about 2 weeks, and I'm recording this right before the release of the third week of Mythic Plus, where Brewmaster is going to be getting a small nerf to their Vital Flame healing. So I wanted to spend some time just going over where Brewmaster is currently in the meta. Obviously, it's meta, and just nerd out about like stats and what gear people are going for, and just yeah, have a good old time. So hopefully, you guys enjoy this video. So we're going to be utilizing, I'm going to be looking at like a couple different sites here, and I just want to talk about just kind of everything. So use the timestamps down below to skip around, but we're going to be starting off on Murlok IO. I apologize for ads. Ads are how these sites get money. So deal with it. So the one thing about Murlok IO, and I'll leave this link down below for the site just in case you haven't heard of it, is it tends to leave out players on the CN region. So it's going to be aggregating data from specifically EU and US. But I do think it still gives us a good scope of how Brewmaster is performing and what the popularity is. So, just in case you aren't aware, the optimal secondary stats for Brewmaster Monk currently is having about 31% critical strike, about 11% versatility, 21% mastery, and then of course we ignore haste. Now 12% haste is going to come from a lot of different sources. If you have like an unlucky high item level weapon, some brewmasters are running that, depending on like the sets you've been given. Obviously, most of our tier items have haste on it, which is super unfortunate, but you want as little haste as possible. Now, some people have been asking me why people are running more verse than mastery and high keys. Simply put, versatility has a higher return for defensive value than mastery does. Now, when coming at it from like a damage perspective or RNG kind of based mitigation, mastery is still really good. And in raid, you still want to stack crit and mastery. But as you get into higher and higher keys, having those additional points of versatility is just going to be a little bit more consistent. This is normally the case, especially in early seasons. Versatility is just such a powerful, yet very boring stat. So this is the priority you're going to be aiming for. If you have a little bit more mastery, a little less verse, that's okay. But as you start climbing into, higher keys, if you're someone who's pushing, start to kind of keep your statistics in mind. Why did I say statistics? Secondary stats. You fucking. Anyways, stat priority for tertiaries. Leech is always going to be the priority. Avoidance doesn't really matter. Stagger is an incredible drug. And honestly, leech healing, based on the damage we're already dealing and the healing we're doing, having that like double dipping leech factor is just so strong. So when it comes to like enchants, or if you happen to have some type of tertiary pieces that drop from dungeons, now you're not gonna like use an item that's 20 item levels lower that has leech on it. But if you had an equal item level piece and maybe even just slightly different stats, like let's say you had a crit verse ring versus a crit mastery ring, but the crit mastery had leech on it, you could argue that you could just wear the crit mastery ring for that additional leech and get versatility elsewhere. So when keeping tertiary stats in mind, leech is definitely the play. So some of the more interesting things I think in the discussion currently going on with Brewmaster is like talent choices. Now, the class tree and the spec tree have a fair bit of leniency, or I guess like expressiveness. There's some interesting things you can take in your class tree that can or may help, the brewmaster stay alive or give you good utility. And so let's kind of talk about it. So the orange, this is a heat map. The orange icons are pretty much the most popular, if not the always taken choice. So if you're like not sure when you're creating your talent tree, what to run, you can use this as a reference. Anything in purple means that it's played by 80% of players. And the choice node means that, Chi Wave is still being played 9% of or 9 out of 50 times. Now, I've been asked a bunch, why do I play Chi Wave? I actually switch between the two. There's some dungeons where I want Chi Burst. Chi Burst is a very powerful tool. Now, I find it personally very clunky. Like, if I had a preference, I do prefer Chi Wave in the current iteration of Brewmaster with the Apex talents, because casting Chi Burst in the rotation right now just feels so clunky, especially in like a big AoE where you're getting constant resets on your brews and you're constantly going like keg breath, blackout, keg breath, blackout, keg breath, keg breath. Like, it's not fun to try to weave a Chi Burst in there. There's also some cool tech like pulling through walls with Chi Burst in Magister's Terrace, for example. So it's a pretty powerful thing to have. But Chi Wave just feels better. It feels like there's less friction in the kit when you play this. Now, a lot of these other talents that are like grayed out but still have a number next to it are just being played by a casual amount of players, like for example, Silent Sanctuary, Bounding Agility, Pressure Points. This is something that's going to like change on a key to key basis. There's some dungeons that have really nasty enrages. Skyreach is a great example. Myasara Caverns is a really good example. And there's a few others that I can't think off the top of my head, but there are plenty of enrages this season that using paralysis. Oh, Agalthar Academy is another one. Very powerful tool, but it's not something you need in every single dungeon. Detox is always being played for the most part. Um, Ox Statue, there's some interesting uses with Ox Statue that I'm going to do a video about in the near future. Something that's really interesting is that people are playing Save Them All. Now, I am like just now realizing that Save Them All was reworked. This used to be based on if you heal someone who is below 30% health or 35% health, you do more healing to them. I didn't realize it's based on the target. So seeing that half the top brewmasters are playing this, I'm starting to question why I'm not playing this. So this is kind of why I like to do these kind of thought exercises about looking at this data because despite being someone who's been playing brewmaster for years and years and years, there are just some things that have still go over my head and that I just don't think about. And seeing what other people kind of come up with is really cool because sometimes a fresh perspective is actually really healthy. So this is interesting. I haven't been playing this, but maybe I would have lived some keys if I was. So big double there. Um, as we scroll down, let's talk about the spec tree really quick. This is probably the tree that I get the most amount of questions about. Mostly because I am someone who is very diehard Anvil and Stave, and I don't like playing high tolerance. Now, I have recently swapped to actually changing up my talent build just a little bit. This is a really common thing we're seeing at the top of the tree where people are loading actually an additional point. Special delivery tends to actually be a little bit more damage than 1 point of walk with the ox. So you can drop all of your walk with the ox, put it into special delivery, and call it a day. Some people are still playing 1 point. One person's playing 2 points. This is mostly if you're going for like pure damage. But this is someone who might have logged off in a raid build. So it's very unlikely that you really even have to play with Walk with the Ox anymore. So this is kind of like an interesting thing. Now, Ox Dance is actually being played in a couple of scenarios. It's being played by Monksy, notably. Now, Ox Dance is a very niche talent. I don't want to go into too many details here, but basically, what it does is it increases the effectiveness of your stagger when you're taking any kind of hit that's more than 60% of your current health. So the best time this is actually useful is when you're sitting at like 40% health and you're taking really heavy auto attacks. So I can think of like a couple of dungeons where this might be the case. Maya Sara is the first one that comes to mind where you have like the berserkers at the start of the dungeon, and when you start getting into like the 18 and 19 range, these mobs start like trucking you. And so having Oxtans for these kind of niche dungeons where you need that extra kind of mitigation, it's really healthy. It's very niche. You kind of have to understand how you're pulling, what you're pulling, and how the damage is being dealt to you. So I don't recommend really people to play Oxtans unless you're someone who kind of knows the damage palette of the dungeon. I've thought about playing Oxdance in a couple of keys, but it hasn't got to the point yet where I feel like I need it. There was a couple of times back in the War Within where I was like, man, I really need this shit to live, or like I need to live this pull. How do I do that? And I think Arakara is the example I always give. At the very end of Arakara, at least in season 1 of the War Within, for people who remember, the Bloodworkers at the end of the dungeon, actually, I guess there's only like 2 brewmasters in the world playing at the time, but those bloodworkers just destroyed tanks. And so Oxdance, I played in that dungeon to get title because I just needed to live that pull. If we lived that pull, my group had the damage to get through. So I sacked some damage, took this defensive talent, and played it in there. And so Oxdance being ran at this point isn't surprising to me, but it's a niche thing. Fuel in the Fire and Empty the Cellar, I feel like these might be some people who either logged off in like raid talents or something, so I would kind of ignore these. These just aren't really feasible to play in Mythic Plus currently. And last but not least, let's talk about Anvil and Stave really quick, because I've been getting asked this question a ton. So I am one of the people who plays 2 points into this. I have such a hard time swapping out of Anvil and Stave. Anvil and Stave in single target is pretty bad, but as someone who's comfortable with like the boss fights, who tested a ton of beta and has been playing Brewmaster as like a hardcore main for the last 4.5 years, I am comfortable on boss fights with the level of stagger I currently have and the defensive kit I have playing with a healer that I've been playing with for the better half of the last 2 years. And so there's never been a boss fight yet where I'm dying. I don't think I can't think unless there's like something that goes crazy wrong. I don't feel the need to play this in Mythic Plus, even doing 18s and 19s. So I have been actually opting to only run 1 point of high tolerance, if any, and putting 2 points into Anvil and Stave. Now, the reason I really like Anvil and Stave is because where Brewmasters, I think, struggle is like large, high impact pulls. So, like, first pull of Algathar. Now, notably, Brewmaster's really strong right now, so it's kind of hard to like argue, like, oh, Brewmaster's like needs help. But being able to like shotgun brews over and over and over again is insane. And sorry if you guys hear my dog. He's like having a little nightmare. So if you hear little like cries, that's him. Anyways, so Anvil and Stave is so good in like first pull of Algathar, first pull of Skyreach, Myasara Caverns for actually most of the pulls. You're having these pulls where you're getting a lot of like melee hits. Oh, Windrunner Spire, like especially in like the Lasher section. Oh my god, you're just like you can shotgun brews like crazy, which is giving you a high amount of resets. It's giving you more damage because of special delivery. I just think Anvil and Stave has like a lot of cool, interesting synergy with the class. And that's why I like to play it. Nothing really else. Now, clearly, there are a lot of brewmasters right now who are ranked higher than me. I think US, I'm sitting at like rank 6, 5 or 6 at the time of recording this video. Um, and so there's people who are playing double high tolerance, and it's clearly really good. It's just something that I just don't care to run. And it's honestly, I think feel crafty. I think it's just subjective at the end of the day. So these are kind of your big trades. And then last but not least, Counter-Strike. Most monks are running it. You can drop this for more defensive power. You probably drop Counter-Strike for like Oxdance, for example. But this is going to help you maintain high single target damage in dungeons, which is kind of needed. Anyways, let's kind of move down. Most people are playing Shado-pan. The nerf to Vital Flame won't change this, I don't think. I think some people might be more inclined to try out Master of Harmony starting tomorrow at the time of, well, at the time of recording this video, the nerfs are coming in tomorrow. Actually, it's so funny to see that Monksy's playing this currently. I mean, again, he might have logged off in a raid build. Same with Alpha. But in the 0.5 patch, in a couple of weeks or a couple months, I don't know when it's coming out, Master of Harmony, they're actually reworking, or not reworking, but they're buffing Harmonic Surge to dispel all stacks instead of just one at a time when you Tiger Palm. And so this is actually getting a slight buff, especially in single target in the near future. And so I think Master of Harmony could be an interesting choice in a couple weeks. I get asked a lot if this is still competitive. Yeah. Yeah, if you're someone who like wants to play Master of Harmony and doesn't really like the feeling of Shado-pan, Master of Harmony is definitely viable. And I'm assuming that Monksy and Alpha might be have logged off in raid builds, but even if they didn't, it doesn't surprise me that they're able to do some of the top keys playing this because it still does competitive damage. It does competitive healing. It's just a different palette where it does more single target, less AoE, and it does even like lower AoE as the pulls scale up. So like first pull of Algathar, Shado-pan just like will triumph every single time. Talking about gear, tier set, most players are going to be opting to run head, shoulder, chest, and gloves. And then pants are being used by some people. Now this comes down to a few things. We're still early enough in the season where if you happen to have a mythic piece in the slot, you're going to obviously wear the mythic piece. If you got like an interesting like chest, like the Vest of the Void Embrace, for example, on Mythic, like you might be wearing that. It kind of just comes down to what you've looted so far. I think a lot of players are this gear is probably going to change. I think the pans will go down because they have so much haste on it, which is just such a bad stat. But a lot of this stuff is obviously really, really good. When it comes to like cloak, two of them come from dungeons. Shroud of the Soul Hunter comes from Myasara Caverns, and Cloak of the Fallen Cardinal comes from Pit of Sauron. So both of these are like heavy crit verse cloaks, and we really like that. Personally, I pulled a mythic Cloak of the Fallen Cardinal this last week, so that's really good. Bracers, any high level bracers that you can catalyze will turn into this high verse, low crit strike guards of Rodden's Chosen. So catalyst piece here also goes really well. And then when it comes to like your other gear, like your belt or your boots, these are going to be like crit mastery or verse mastery items because there aren't really any good crit verse pieces from dungeons outside of like crafting. Now, when it comes to embellished items, there's a couple of things that people are running. Now, a lot of people are actually running the Loa Worshipper's Band and Stabilizing Gemstone, at least on EU and US servers, followed by the Weapon Enchant for Void. Now, this is if you crafted a weapon. If you've been in my Discord or you've asked me directly about crafting a weapon versus other items, I've been suggesting that people don't craft weapon yet. But let's say this next week or this reset, or by the time you're watching this video, you haven't crafted a weapon yet. Open up your vault. If you haven't gotten a mythic weapon yet, that's when I'd start thinking about crafting a mythic weapon. Now, you're eventually probably going to replace a mythic crafted weapon with an actual mythic weapon because that item level is really important to have in the kind of in the long term and at like the min max high level kind of gain or like how powerful you want your character to be. But crafting a weapon in the near future won't be a bad idea if you've been unlucky from your vault. Probably me because I'm never going to see a weapon. When it does come to weapons, though, most players are gonna use like some kind of pike staff or a polearm. There's a couple of good ones from the raid, obviously from Voracious, the second boss of Voidspire. The one from Chimeris has bad stats, but if you can get it on Mythic for some reason, and your guild's killing that on Mythic, or you're able to pug it somehow, that's a good it's a Mythic animal polearm, so you're gonna wear that anyways. Um, and so, yeah, and then if you can't, like, dual wielding is fine. A question I've been also getting asked, like, which is better, dual wield versus polearm? They're relatively equal. There's not really an argument you can make for one or the other. I think in low target count, from what I've seen, at least in Peak of Serenity Discord and from the Wowhead guide, is that technically dual wielding pulls out a little bit in smaller pull counts, but they're so close that it won't actually matter at the end of the day. And some of that just comes down to like crits. Um, and last but not least, I do want to mention trinkets. So I've been running Solar Flare and Gloom Spatter Dread Scale. If you can get your hands on a Gaze of the Elnseer, this is a really strong trinket right now. It has a ton of value. If you're unlucky like me and you raid with a team who's going to funnel it to DPS and healers first, you might have to wait on this item for a bit. So that's why I've been running this combination. If you feel like you're falling over in some pulls or need an extra defensive, Dread Scale is such an insanely powerful item that if you can get your hands on it, really, really good. I don't wanna spend too much time going over, like, the kind of the lower stuff, like enchants and shit. Just do your research. You can use the site, look at what enchants people are running. These are all gonna be accurate. The last thing I wanna talk about is racials. Yes, Dwarf is really good, but you're gonna also see a lot of players committing to the Night Elf, myself included. You can also play things like Pandaren or even Mag'har Orc. Um, Racials don't really matter in my opinion. Playing Dwarf is nice because you can actually send, like, Dwarf racial on the first pull of Algothar to remove a bleed, or on the first boss of Algothar to remove a bleed, or some shit in Skyreach to remove a bleed. Like there's a lot of uses for the dwarf racial, but I also think that playing a night elf has its merit to doing specific skips. Now, at the end of the day, I'm a big believer in if you're going to play an MMO, it's a video game, and you should play the race that you think looks really cool. Because if you like the way your character looks, you're going to probably enjoy playing the game more. So don't overthink this. My argument is if you die to a bleed, chances are you're not the type of person who is so good at the game that you're the only counterplay to a mechanic is having a racial. Chances are you probably could have played it better. And so again, my argument is just play what you enjoy. So that's pretty much Murlok IO. I'll leave this down below if you want to take a look. This does update like every 12 hours based on Blizzard's API. Now, unfortunately, if you log off in like raid talents, which I do generally like earlier in the week, it'll actually like inflate some of these numbers or deflate some of the numbers because people play different raid builds, of course. But generally towards the end of the week or on weekends, a lot of people are pushing keys. So this is always a good time to look. So let's jump over to Raider IO really quick because I want to look at some statistics over there. So right now I'm looking at the Mythic Plus stats on Raider IO for Midnight Season 1, all regions 15 and up, because I want to see spec popularity. Now you're going to see an overwhelming amount of players playing Brewmaster. This is pretty much the go-to tank, and it's getting inflated for the simple fact that all other tanks are balanced so poorly that, well, I shouldn't even say, I kind of can. It's like they're not balanced well, but Brewmaster's also really fun. So I think there's just like this really interesting duality or dichotomy happening where you make a really fun class that's also really good, and other tanks take more skill, have less stats, and just like aren't as fun to play because they didn't get as many changes or reworks. So Brewmaster is very captivating to a lot of people currently. And so obviously a lot of people are swapping to it. Now, with the buffs that are coming in and the nerfs that are happening to Brewmaster this next week, we might start to see a little bit better representation on other tanks as people maybe be like, well, Brewmaster is not as fun now that their healing is nerfed, and maybe they're buffing my Blood Death Knight, and I can go back to playing that. Now, obviously, that's a very weird edge case, but I do think that this number is going to drop off in future weeks just because of those nerfs, and as other tanks and other people start to get more gear and start to figure out, um, just like how to play their class, I guess I should say. So luckily, Brewmaster is a tank that is like one of the only tanks that doesn't need haste or doesn't want haste at all. So the class always feels the same to play, where most tanks want a lot of haste. And when you're a haste based class, this isn't just even tanks. When you're a haste based class, the first season always feels like shit. It just does because you have way less haste than you normally would at like the end of an expansion. Like coming out of the war within, you had way more haste than you do going into midnight. So the meta comp that we're actually ending up seeing is something along the lines of Unholy DK. We are seeing a lot of Frost Mages, but the comps that are actually pushing the highest is a combination of Unholy DK, Devourer Demon Hunter, and Augmentation Evoker, along with that Restoration Druid. That's what a lot of the Chinese teams are running. That's what a lot of the top US teams are running as well. Frost Mage, Demo Warlock, and Ret Paladin all fit in really well to the meta comp as well. You can kind of shift around any of these classes. Most people are preferring to run with an AUG because while they don't look good in the details meter in game, because Blizzard's meters just kind of suck, Augmentation does a shitload of damage, and buffing the right classes does even better. But I think there's a conception or a misconception that they still require good DPS to play with. Augmentation just does so much damage by itself now that it doesn't really need to cater to its DPS, and they don't need good DPS to be playing with to perform well. And so overall, Augmentation is getting slotted in at kind of that first DPS spot, and then you fill it in with whatever else. So whether it's Devour Frostmage Warlock, Warlock Death Knight, Ret Paladin, you can kind of fit in any of these classes in the meta comp right now. Now, me personally, I'm still playing the old school kind of Fizz comp. We're playing Brewmaster, Resto Shaman, Arms Warrior, Outlaw Rogue, which obviously is not like a super popular class at the current state. But that's the comp that my group's running just because we like the Fizz comp, and that's what people like to play. And so I've been playing Brewmaster for years, and they never asked me to swap. And just because now I'm meta, I'm not expecting my group to swap to play other things because we play what we want to play, we enjoy what we enjoy, and we just like gaming together. And so the stats are kind of interesting to look at. Frost Death Knight is down really bad. There's a lot of other specs that just aren't doing super well. I think Rogue is probably the most notorious, like down bad spec right now. I think almost every other class has like a high performing spec besides like Rogue. I feel like every Rogue spec is kind of just doo doo. Anyways, so yeah, those are those stats. So the last thing I kind of want to talk about, and this is just like a small tangent rant thing that I'll just kind of like mention. So I've been asked this a few times from people is about MDI, if Brewmaster is going to be meta for the MDI, and if I plan on competing. The answer is no. Ultimately, I've asked my group. My group doesn't have any interest in competing, and I don't really want to play with a group that's not my group. Unless there's like a really weird circumstance where like some group was looking for a tank. But the reason I'm kind of bringing this up is because people have asked me, but it's interesting because if you aren't aware, the MDI is actually going to like the speedrunning format, like the old school MDI, not the Great Push template that they've been using the last couple seasons. It's going back to we're going to speed run plus 12s or plus 10s or plus 9s or whatever it ends up being. And so the reason why I don't think Brewmaster is going to be meta there is because I think when you're in that setting, and this is speculation as someone who's never competed before, but who really likes Mythic Plus. When I think about these dungeons, I think all tanks at a low level are extremely powerful. We're seeing like damage buffs to Protection Paladin, for example, and then in this next week, we might see future changes in the 0.5 patch. And when you're going into that speedrunning content, you need to be able to pull really, really, really big, have the group utility to live, and something like Avenger Shield is a great example of a utility item or spell or even just a rotational thing that keeps a mob silenced. And what normally will stop big, big, big pulls is casters. if you can play with a class that can spam silence multiple mobs or at least one mob, I think, and can potentially do even more burst damage and offers utilities and immunities and all this other stuff. I think that like something like a protection paladin or even a prot warrior or even a vengeance demon hunter, even though that's laughable right now in their current state, like a protection warrior, protection paladin, I think would be a better candidate for pushing those types of keys in that format. You know, Brewmaster's obviously really strong right now for living these high end content. They're obviously meta if it was like a great push type format, but it's just interesting to kind of think about it, like what classes would actually be good. It's going to be your it's coordinated big pulls, cooldowns, and figuring out exactly what needs to happen to get things stacked up, locked down, and killed in a short period of time in a literally like speed running format of Mythic Plus versus again the high end pushing. So yeah, anyways, that was like a big Brewmaster update, a little rant video for you guys. I hope you enjoyed. Um, I don't really know how to end this video because I didn't really plan this video. I'm just recording this at like 1:30 in the morning because I can't sleep, and I just finished getting Brazil 18, so it felt pretty good. So yeah, if you have any questions about Brewmaster, leave them down below. Um, I'll have a ton of stuff coming out in the future weeks, from commentaries to shorter guides to shorts, as well as my master class, which I'm now compiling all that footage for because I've been running keys like crazy. Um, and so yeah, keep an eye out for all that. I can't thank you guys enough. My channel has blown up, and I tweeted this the other day, but like I have like imposter syndrome right now, where I've seen the most growth my channel has seen in like the last like 5 years I've been doing YouTube in just the last month. And I'm getting a ton of people asking me about just the class, and I'm getting a ton of people like thanking me for my videos. And it's just like, it's so surreal. And I can't thank you guys enough. And it means the world to me. And I'm so grateful. I can't even put into words. So yeah, thank you guys. Anyways, that's it. I will catch y'all later. Peace.